Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this is week 2 for September's book of the month, Good Duke Gone Wild by Bethany Bennett. So cute. So we have Dorian, and he is at the theater and he is miserable. He's
Yeah.
got zero interest in this poor girl that his mom has invited to the theater. And
And her parents is that are not there because
they
they're,
got
you know, they're
sick
off.
or
So it's
whatever.
really
Yeah.
just the three of them. And he's like, oh,
He's miserable. And so his butt's like falling asleep. So he excuses himself for a minute to take a walk. And who should he run into but Caroline, who, of course, has just seen him in the box earlier that night. He knows immediately that she's mad. And because she's like killing him with kindness. And he's like, what did I do? Which I was like, such a smart question.
yeah.
And so he realizes that she's jealous and he explains the situation to her. And she tells him about getting spilled on and proposed to. And then he's jealous. So they've yeah, it's very funny moment. And so they kind of snuggle a bit and they're talking and they agree to see each other again soon. And neither of them will get engaged in the meantime.
Yeah. Even though apparently both of them are very hot on the
Yes.
market.
So in the library, the next day, Dorian's mom pays her a visit. She is clearly no dummy and has attributed her son's sudden lack of interest in finding a wife to Caroline's presence in the house. And she's trying to kind of manipulate Caro, like, don't you think his duty is the most important thing, et cetera, et cetera. And she's not having it. She's like, I'm sorry, if you have something to say to your son, you should probably be saying it to him. Like, why are you telling me this? Basically, like she's not having it at all, which is great. And so after the dowager leaves, Caro finds a few more letters. And one of them is actually signed Sherman, which is the first time she's seen any name besides like Romeo.
Romeo.
And that also makes her realize that the Duke did not write these letters. And so she's even more horrified than she already was about bringing the letter to him because she's like, oh my God, no wonder he was so upset. I like blew up his idea of what his marriage was. Like, this is horrible, right? And of course, he already knew what she doesn't know that yet. And she feels wretched. And she recognizes a turn of phrase from the night before at the theater and she's like, wait a minute, like that sounds familiar. And so maybe the playwright is involved in this somehow. So she goes to give them to Dorian and she's quiet. And he tells her, not for the first time, let me into the pause, which I love the way that they like say that to each other and how much they really want to know each other and like what they're thinking. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it started off just because he noticed, well, the very first time he met her, she was like nonplussed. And so
Yeah.
she said what she thought immediately and then
Yeah.
like thought, oh, I
No,
better
yeah.
censor myself. But since then, he had noticed that she is very composed all the time. And he was
Mhm.
like, I can see her like thinking a thing
And
and
saying
then
something else.
like editing.
Saying the proper thing or whatever. Yeah.
And so he, for a long time, I guess, had been really curious about what actually was the thing happening in
Right.
her head. And this is their way of asking each other, like, okay, uncensored, like
Right.
what's
It's
going
really
on?
sweet. And so they talk about his wife, and she brings up the playwright and his mom and everything that, has been happening. And she asks him to tell her once he settles on somebody to marry because she's not going to be his mistress. Like once he's engaged, like that's it for them.
Yeah.
And he agrees, but he hates the feeling that this is already like on its way out, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
It's kind of cute because it's like they set ground, or she sets ground rules before they really like start anything. So it's like
right. Like they've kissed a couple
he's
times, but that's it. They haven't really done anything yet. Yeah.
yeah. So he's very much like, no, but I really like her in
And we're
here.
already talking about the end of it. Yeah. So of course she can't sleep that night. She finally unloads all her truths on her cousins about him and everything that's been going on. And so today now she's tired, but thankfully it's been a quiet day at the shop. But then the Dowager shows up looking for Blanche Clementine's new book.
Yeah.
Caro like
She
hides in her office,
she's not
which was
she is
very
not
lucky that she
interested in
was
having
back
a
there.
conversation. She had spoken to a person who was like aspiring to write and had kind of, not as not as Blanche Clementine, but she was like, she had
Yeah,
been kind of antsy about like her own like career or whatever, and she was still kind of back when the dowager came in.
yeah,
So it was like kind of lucky timing.
very lucky. Yeah.
And
Um,
the but the
Hattie and Connie,
I
her
was gonna
cousins, are they've obviously dealt with the Duke many times before Caro came along, and probably his mom too. But this time, they come up with this story about having the only signed copy of this book, and it strongly imply that one of her like contemporaries, friends, wants it.
like frenemies, really. She's
Yeah,
the dowager is like, she's like, I need to read this book because people keep saying like kind of cryptic stuff, and then when she asks about it, they're like, oh no, you need to read it
yeah,
yourself. And so she's like, I want this book. But when the cousins start hinting that it's Lady Jersey, who is a actual real life like matron and like patron of the Almacs and whatever,
right.
but it's a lady who's like, anyway, she is very snobbishly like interested in like one upping this lady, and
Yeah.
like
And of
if
course,
it's
they're like, "She hasn't paid for it yet, so, like, what are we to do if somebody wants to come in and buy it first?" kind of a thing, and so they, like, talk her into this exorbitant amount
they
of money to pay for
they
a signed
definitely are
copy.
like egging her on, and they're
Yeah.
like, we couldn't possibly say who I mean,
Yeah.
like they're definitely milking, and Caro's in the back like just
Like,
trying to
"Oh my
avoid the
god."
situation
Yeah.
until they show up, and they're like, you need to sign this book
"Here, sign
because
this
we
book."
told.
And so she agrees to buy it, and it was very funny. So, Dorian and Oliver go to see the playwright. Turns out the words are his, but not the letters themselves. Basically, a man paid him years ago to write like segment of
Love
letters,
letters.
and then he then copied and pasted things together for himself, basically, like writing the
Yeah.
uh
It's
to
like a
the
Cyrano de
playwright.
Bergerac situation. Like
Right,
and
exactly.
the guy describes this Sherman, and it's like
Like
he's just like
tasteless porridge,
he says he is like tasteless porridge
like
in
paste.
human form, but also he's like, he looks like someone like smushed his nose with a brick. Also, and I'm just like, what in the world?
Yeah, and you're like,
Like,
how did she have an affair with the man who's like has no money, has no standing, isn't good looking, isn't buff,
yeah,
isn't anything. Like, and apparently also can't even write letters without
his
help.
own letters. Yeah,
Um,
the thing that was funny was that the playwright is like, I'm usually very good at descriptions, but really, there's nothing. He was
right,
kind of like,
that's
there's
it.
nothing to
Yeah.
describe. He's just,
And later on, it's funny because when they do see him for the first time, they're like, wow, he really nailed it. Like, what else can you say about
he was like eye color.
Yeah, so funny.
everything
Usually it's like
everything about him
blue,
is
but
just
like the
like,
most nondescript blue you could have, whatever. Like, yeah, it's hilarious. And so the guy's full name is Sherman Snyder.
mhm.
Um, and he was from Tippering, which is
Yeah,
where Juliet supposedly was sponsoring this school
the
for
house.
children.
Yeah.
And so they are gonna have to go to Tippering. So Caro is
The thing that's also kind of funny in this scene is that Oliver comes with, like, so he's brought his friend with him, and this Snyder is like, it's like messy. Like, it sounds like he's very much like a slob.
yeah.
But when Oliver walks in, he's like, hey,
Oh, the playwright is, yeah,
the
seems snobbish,
playwright
but his
is,
place is a disaster. Yeah.
yeah, but the playwright is real like interested in.
Well, because he can tell they're rich and he needs patrons.
Anyway, it's very funny. Just to
It
me,
was
it was
funny.
funny that they were like, yeah, we're not.
That's not why we're here.
Um, but yeah. So anyway, but he does give them like another clue, which is nice, and it's more than
Yeah,
what he's had before.
a lot
So
more than what he's had before.
Dorian's like happy about that, but also kind of up in his feelings because he is like, what was my wife doing with this dude? With like
Right. Like now, like it makes even less
something
sense
to
now than it
retrograde.
did before. Yeah. So Caro's a bit ill at ease with how much her book is selling this time. Like she's not really sure what happened, like why all of a sudden the everybody in the town is like reading her book.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like the other books sold
right,
enough, but like we like in the prologue, it seemed like she had been saving up for years, and now all of a sudden with one book, she's almost back at the
almost
savings
back.
that
Yeah.
she had before. So she I mean, this is selling
And
like
of course,
hotcakes.
she's nervous because the hero is based on the Duke, but it was before she really knew him. So it's more like based on the archetype of the Duke. But she's like, I really hope I removed any identifying info
Identifying,
from
yeah.
him. Like that's I hope that this is not like that's not why people are like buying the book
Well,
or
and she is kind of like, now that I know, like I think now that she knows him, she feels a little bit guilty about
yeah,
making like a caricature of him
right.
to put in her book.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's like at this point, it's not even that she thinks that people can identify him, but it's like she knows
She
that
knows that it was
he
based on him.
isn't,
Yeah.
yeah, that it was based on him, but also that it was like not an accurate portrayal of who he is as a person either. Like she's just kind of like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I took this like outside of him and like
Right.
made a made a character based on like what I assumed, and what I assumed was not correct.
Right. And so later on, there's some family excitement because her cousin Connie gets engaged. Caro and Hattie have some reservations, but she seems so happy that they decide not to say anything right away.
Yeah. And Hattie has, and like she had a bad relationship in the past. So she's very like,
We still don't really know anything about it, but like everything that they talk about with her
she's like skeptical about love anyway.
about love and about like men in general, it seems. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm sure we'll learn more about that
So
later.
I think she's trying not to like poo poo on her sister's
Right.
moment,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not sure.
And so a customer writes and wants 3 of the Duke's books, but he wants them personally delivered to Kent. And this is a guy who her uncle has sort of befriended over the years, so she's thinking she's going to send him there. But Hattie is like, actually, you should go because that's very close to the cottage that I was talking about. You should go look at it.
Yeah. So Caro, and this we talked about last time when we were doing chapters 1 through 10, but she from the prologue, she has been wanting to like buy a place of her own and have a home that like can't be taken away from her
Yeah,
basically. And her cousin found out about these people who have a little cottage that they want to move away from, they want to sell it. And so this is like a prime opportunity
right.
for
She's
Caroline to
like,
go
and she's like,
to
oh, I've
look
been there. It
at
would be perfect for you. It's, exactly what you would want. Um, and so she decides that she will do that. So Dorian is drunk. He started reading the new Blanche Clementine book, but he also got like up in his feels and he's been drinking and now it's like 1 a.m. and his mind is like racing. And
yeah,
he's thinking about his Jules, his late wife, and where he went wrong for her to stray because he was so shocked that she would have done that. And everything about it, everything else he finds out about it is making it make less and less sense. So he's like, what did I do? Like, how did this happen?
yeah. And then originally he was like angry and upset and whatever, but also like, I know you were lonely, but I was lonely too. Like we were both
Right.
separated from each other, so he like
How could
couldn't
you
get
do this?
why.
Yeah.
But the more he finds out, the more he's like, what?
It
Because
makes even
if
less sense. Yeah. And so he imagines that he's having a conversation with her. It's heartbreaking, honestly, like the way that he's picturing this conversation going. And of course, you know, because in his head he's asking her questions and she can't answer them. And he's like, her ghost would know. And it's like, yeah, but she doesn't know because she's you.
I don't
You know
know.
what I mean? Like this is all in your brain. So you don't know, she doesn't know.
Yeah, and
Um,
he's like, it's almost like he's happy to be because he wasn't able to come even for her death or funeral. So it's kind of like bittersweet, I guess.
Yeah.
But also it's a bit of a goodbye. Like
Yeah.
he's kind of like, I don't know what happened. And he does start to like he says that he's afraid that he whatever he could because he doesn't understand what happened with her, that whoever he marries again or whatever relationship he's
Right.
in
He'll make the
again,
same
that he'll
mistake.
do the same.
Yeah.
So that was sad.
And as he's thinking this, he's like, Sherman is the only one who could maybe give him answers, but he's sort of scared of the answers also. So Carol visits their customer in Kent and stays there for many hours and like uses the excuse of having to catch the mail train back to get away, even though she's spending the night at
He's
the end.
chatty is the thing.
Yes. And
He
she's
just
like, and
like
he's great. Like I didn't mind talking with him, but like, oh my God, I gotta go. And so she starts walking and it starts to rain, like sleeting rain, because it's still winter. And just as she's starting to get soaked, a carriage approaches, and the guy, on the horses is like, oh my gosh, you'll catch your death. Like, hop on, we can take you. She says she's staying at the inn. And as she's walking toward the back to like get a seat on the outside, the door opens and it's the Duke. And he's like, what are you doing out here? And like, pulls her inside, obviously.
yeah.
And so he cuddles her up. She's freezing cold. They're talking and they're flirting. And he asks if she'll invite him into her room at the inn. And she agrees that she will. And they start making plans, um, including for the next day. She's staying because she has to make another delivery. Um, and so he says, he'll take her to do
Go with
that, and
her.
then she can just ride home with him instead of having to catch the mail cart or whatever. Which of
Her
course will be
walk,
more
which seemed
enjoyable.
like her
Yeah.
traveling of choice.
Yes. And so in her room, they're bantering and they finally have sex for the first time, and it is like magical and wonderful and everything she like hoped it would be. And in the
And
morning,
she's not in the beginning. We found out that she was not like a virgin, but
yeah,
her past experiences had been kind of lackluster.
right.
And
Only a
this
few times and nothing was like exciting for her really.
Yeah, and she has been writing like a new book, and the character in the new book is more kind of assertive and takes charge more. And so she
Yeah.
kind of takes a page from her character's book, I guess, in this
Yeah.
instance. And it's kind of, it is
Yeah.
a little bit more forth or what's it called? Forthright in
Yes.
asking for what she wants
Yep.
and ends up having a great time.
Yeah. And she's
Except
like,
that he
"Oh, this is
snores.
this is the secret." Yeah.
Yeah. Except he snores, so she doesn't get any sleep
Oh my God, no
at
sleep.
all.
And she's miserable because she's like, oh my God, that was amazing. But also like, oh my God, you're snoring. And so she sets off to find some tea because she's like dead to the world. And so he finds her there down in the inn after being worried she left him. Like she can see on his face that he was like very upset. And then when he sees her, he's like
Well,
really,
he comes down with like bedhead and everything. He's like, then he's like, "Oh, you didn't leave," and she's just
she's
like,
like,
"What
why
the
would I
heck?"
leave? Yeah. And so they're talking and she asks him why he was in Tippering, and he tells her about why he went there and that there is no school there. So that was definitely like his wife got swindled. And also nobody in the town would talk to him about Sherman or anything really. Um and so
The thing
she
that's funny is that she's kind of like, "Well, that makes sense that they think that
right.
you're some kind
And
of
he's like,
like
"What do you mean?"
jilted."
She's like, "You roll in with your like coach with your, emblem on it and your fancy, clothes, and like of course they're not going to talk to you." And so they
Well,
decide to
because
go.
they think that he's like, if they don't want to be involved in whatever, like if they know that guy, they know that it's not a good thing that some
Right. And
duke
so
is
they're
looking for
not
him.
going to
So
be speaking up for sure. Not even to like protect the guy as much as like protect themselves from acting
they
like they have
just don't
anything
want to be
to do with
part
it.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they decide to go back there and try again before heading home. And Caro,
Caroline like has a plan. She's
yeah,
so funny. She's like, "You haven't used all your resources," and he's like, "What are you talking about?
yeah,
I was charming. It didn't help. I offered money. Nobody wanted it." And
no,
she's just
yeah.
like,
She's like, nope,
she has a
wrong
plan.
way. So she pretends to be Alice, who is pregnant with twins by her fiance, Sherman. And she's like, I skipped the pub because the pub is full of men who do nothing but like brag about their accomplishments to each other. So if anything, they might know what he did and be okay with it. Like they're not going to be helpful. So she goes and talks to this shopkeeper, um, who kind of takes pity on her and tells her all the tea, and then some, including that the man's connection to these upper crust ladies that he's swindling is his cousin, Lord Bixby, who has like introduced him to these people.
Yeah.
And so she gets back to the carriage and Dorian is thrilled with everything she learned, but also like so impressed by her in general, which he already is
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah. And so he goes with her to make her delivery, which is at the
Cottage that she might
cottage that
want to
she
buy.
wants to look at. And he is like growing sad as he's literally watching her fall in love with this house. And he's like, oh God, she's gonna leave me. Like, this is terrible, right?
Which
And
is hilarious since he's about to like
get
find
married
a
to somebody
wife.
else in theory.
It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
And so of course he hates the idea of her being so far out of town, but he can also see how much she really loves this place and that how much she's excited by the idea of living there.
He's
Um,
also like, I could buy it for you, and she's like, shut up. Like,
yeah,
no,
like no, I
I'm
don't need you to do that. That's not why I'm with you. Yeah. Well, and she also kind of comforts him like she's like because they tell her they're not ready to move until spring. And so she's like spring is still some time away, like, and you could be like ready tomorrow to marry somebody else for all I know. You know what I mean? Like we're not like we don't know how much time we have, but we know it's not long no matter what. Whether I move
yeah.
here or you get married, like either way, it's not long. Um
He hates it.
so
I
yeah,
mean,
and
she
of
hates
course
it
neither
too,
of them
but
want to say goodbye.
she's being practical, but he is not a fan of this
No,
at all.
not at all. And so at home, it's Dorian who can't sleep this time. And he gets up early and he heads to get Oliver to help him find Sherman. So, and he also decides he's going to pick Caro up on the way because the only reason they even know any of this stuff is because of her, and he doesn't want to like cut her out at this point. Um, and so Connie ends up coming with them too because she was going to go with Connie to the shops to pick out some stuff for her wedding. And so they kind of let her in on this caper that they're doing. And she is very in her element. Like she's
She's a
helping getting
justice for
info
the
at the
women of
coffee house.
London.
Yeah, like she has no problem doing basically the same thing that Caroline did the day before, like, pretending to be somebody else and getting information from people. Like she loves it.
Yeah.
But they do hit a dead end. Um, and they can't find like he's already left the place that everybody last knew he was staying, that kind of thing. And so Dorian is going to have to speak to Lord Bixby, which he didn't really want to do. He doesn't have a good impression of the man, even though he doesn't really know him. And so he wasn't looking forward to like airing his dirty laundry to him either, obviously. So if he doesn't already know it. So yeah, he's not thrilled about that, but that's basically the only other like clue that they have. And so it seems that Connie and Oliver are having some serious banter during this little caper. And of course, they're both currently engaged to other people. So very curious what's going to happen with that.
Mhm.
So
We
later,
should say that in this part too, like
yeah,
Althea, who is Oliver's intended,
yeah,
is not really feel like she doesn't seem like she is wanting to like set a date or do any.
right,
So
no.
he's kind of
Which
frustrated at
totally
that.
understandable considering her sister was the one that was supposed to marry him. Like, who wants to be second choice? No one.
Yeah.
Not that her sister was even first choice. Like they got arranged. Like they didn't, neither of them
Could
had
you
it.
imagine being like second degree marriage of convenience? Like,
Right? Like
like
your sister gets set up, she runs off, and you get set up instead. Like, yeah, horrible. Can't imagine. And so later on, Caroline goes to talk to Gerard and Leo, her friends who proposed the marriage of convenience to her, to turn down their proposal. She also tells them about her author alter ego. They are delighted by this. But Gerard immediately like puts on his legal hat and is like, who's negotiating your contract? Are you
yeah.
getting what you should be getting? He's
Gerard is
very,
like, do you have representation? And
yes,
did
it's
you did
very
that?
cute.
He's like, don't tell me you keep your money in a tin. And
And
she's
she's
just
like,
like,
Okay, I won't tell you
It's like
that.
it used to be a sock, but anyway,
It's very
he
funny.
is just like, look, lady, I might not be able to marry you, but I am going to
But
make
I
sure
can help
you're
you.
getting
Yeah.
paid and that you have a bank account. Like,
Yes, it's very cute. And so that night she arrives at Dorian's house and they're very flirty and he gives her these like beeswax earplugs that he got for her, which was so cute. And so they have
he
sex
tells
again, of
her
course.
that he doesn't want to be like a cause of like any kind of problem for her,
Yeah.
but also he doesn't want her to be far away from him. Like he
Like he
wants to
wants her to
be with
stay with him
her
at night and
there.
stuff. Yeah, it's so
So I
cute.
was like, that was cute. He got
So
his
cute.
butler to find a solution, and he did.
Yes. And so they have sex again, and it's very clear that they are both having strong feelings about each other. And they know that this is going to be disastrous for both of their hearts, but it's like too late to turn back
Too
now.
late. Yeah,
And
they're
that's the end of chapter 20. So, ugh,
I
so
will say too that
happening.
in this chapter, and just before we move on, because it'll come up next week
Yeah.
too, is that he is very like, oh, it's fine, and just the servants know you're here. And she's like, sir, if you don't think
If
that
you
these
think
are
they're
the
not all
people,
talking about it,
she's just like, even if they are like good and loyal to you and keep, that
right.
doesn't mean that they don't see what's going on.
And
And
have opinions. Yeah, for sure.
so yeah. So anyway, it ends on a fun note, and it was funny because they, I think, spent a good amount, like that first third, I don't know, the solidly the first third of the book they were like from afar, like eyeing each
Yeah.
other, but as soon as they got together they're like together, so
Yeah.
it's kind of fun.
It's great.
All right.
So we'll see everybody next week
Mm-hmm.
for the last bit, and we can't wait.
Yeah, see you then.